Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master on Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we're here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 30, Text 19. Yamhaduto tadha prapto bhimo sarabhasikshano sadristva trasta hridaya sakrinmutram vimhunchati. At death, he sees the messengers of the Lord of Death come before him, their eyes full of wrath, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. Purport. There are two kinds of transmigration of a living entity after passing away from the present body. One kind of transmigration is to go to the controller of sinful activities, who is known as Yamaraj, and the other is to go to the higher planets up to Vaikuntha. Here, Lord Kapila describes how persons engaged in activities of sense gratification to maintain a family are treated by the messengers of Yamaraj, called the Yamadutas. At the time of death, the Yamadutas become the custodians of those persons who have strongly gratified their senses. They take charge of the dying man and take him to the planet where Yamaraj resides. The conditions there are described in the following verses. Text 20. Yatana deha avritya pasar badhava gale balat nayato dirgam advantam dandhyam raja batayata. As a criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by the Yamadutas, who bind him by the neck with a strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. Purport. Every living entity is covered by a subtle and gross body. The subtle body is covering of the mind, ego, intelligence, and consciousness. It is said in the scriptures that the constables of Yamaraj cover the subtle body of the culprit and take him to the abode of Yamaraj to be punished in a way that he is able to tolerate. He does not die from this punishment, because if he died, then who would suffer the punishment? It is not the business of the constables of Yamaraj to put one to death. In fact, it is not possible to kill a living entity because factually he is eternal. He simply has to suffer the consequences of his activities of sense gratification. The process of punishment is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Formerly, the king's men would take a criminal in a boat in the middle of a river. They would dunk him by grasping a bunch of his hair and thrusting him completely underwater. And when he was almost suffocated, the king's constables would take him out of the water and allow him to breathe for some time. And then they would again dunk him in the water to suffocate. This sort of punishment is inflicted upon the forgotten soul by Yamaraj, as will be described in the following verses. Text 21. Tayor nirbina hridayas tarjanar jata vepatu patisvabir bhakshamana artogam svam anusmaran. While carried by the constables of Yamaraj, he is overwhelmed and trembles in their hands. While passing on the road, he is bitten by dogs, and he can remember the sinful activities of his life. He is thus terribly distressed. Purport. It appears from this verse that while passing from this planet to the planet of Yamaraj, the culprit arrested by Yamaraj's constables meets many dogs, which bark and bite just to remind him of his criminal activities of sense gratification. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that one becomes almost blind and is bereft of all sense when he is infuriated by the desire for sense gratification. He forgets everything. Kamaistais hrita jnana. One is bereft of all intelligence when he is too attracted by sense gratification. And he forgets that he has to suffer the consequences also. Here, the chance for recounting his activities of sense gratification is given by the dogs engaged by Yamaraj. While we live in the gross body, such activities of sense gratification are encouraged even by modern government regulations. In every state all over the world, such activities are encouraged by the government in the form of birth control. Women are supplied pills and they are allowed to go to a clinical laboratory to get assistance for abortions. This is going on as a result of sense gratification. Actually, sex life is meant for begetting a good child, but because people have no control over the senses, and there is no institution to train them to control the senses, the poor fellows fall victim to the criminal offenses of sense gratification, and they are punished after death as described in these pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 22. Kshutrit parito ka davanala nilai shantapyamana patitaptavaluke kritrena priste kasaya chataditas shalatya suktopi nirasamudake. Under the scorching sun, the criminal has to pass through roads of hot sand with forest fires on both sides. He is whipped on the back by constables because of his inability to walk, and he is afflicted by hunger and thirst. But unfortunately, there is no drinking water, no shelter, and no place for rest on the road. Text 23. Tatra tatra patantranto murchita punar utita pata papiya sanitas tarasayama saranam. While passing on that road to the abode of Yamaraj, he falls down in fatigue, and sometimes he becomes unconscious, but he is forced to rise again. In this way, he is very quickly brought to the presence of Yamaraj. Text 24. Yojananam sahasrani navatim navachadvana tribhir muhurtar vabhyamba nita prapnoti yatanaha. Thus he has to pass 99,000 yojanas within 2 or 3 moments, and then he is at once engaged in the torturous punishment which he is destined to suffer. Purport. 1 yojana is calculated to be 8 miles, and he has to pass along a road which is therefore as much as 792,000 miles. Such a long distance is passed over within a few moments only. The subtle body is covered by the constables so that the living entity can pass such a long distance quickly and at the same time tolerate the suffering. This covering, although material, is of such fine elements that material scientists cannot discover what the coverings are made of. To pass 792,000 miles within a few moments seems wonderful to the modern space travelers. They have so far traveled at a speed of 18,000 miles per hour. But here we see that a criminal passes 792,000 within a few seconds only, although the process is not spiritual but material. Text 25. Adipanam svagatranam vistayit volmukadibi atma mamshadanam krapi swakritam paratopiva. He is placed in the midst of burning pieces of wood, and his limbs are set on fire. In some cases, he is made to eat his own flesh or have it eaten by others. Purport. From this verse through the next 3 verses, a description of punishment will be narrated. The first description is that the criminal has to eat his own flesh, burning with fire, or allow others like himself who are present there to eat. In the last great war, people in concentration camps sometimes ate their own stool. So there is no wonder that in the Yamasadana, the abode of Yamaraj, one who had very enjoyable life eating others' flesh has to eat his own flesh. Text 26. Jivatas chantra bhumadhara svagridvaryama sadane sarpa vrikshika damsadyar dasadbischatma vaishasham. His entrails are pulled out by the hounds and vultures of hell, even though he is still alive to see it, and he is subjected to torment by serpents, scorpions, gnats, and other creatures that bite him. 27. Krintanam chavayavaso gajadbhyo bidapadanam gajadibhyo bidapanam patanam giri shringebhyo rodhanam chambu gartayo. Next, his limbs are lopped off and torn asunder by elephants. He is hurled down from hilltops, and he is also held captive either in water or in a cave. Text 28. Yas tamishranda tamishra varavadascha yatana bunte naro varnariva mita sangena nirmita. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence in illicit sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in the hells known as Tamisra, Anta Tamisra, and Rorava. Purport. Materialistic life is based on sex life. The existence of all the materialistic people who are undergoing severe tribulation in the struggle for existence is based on sex. Therefore, in the Vedic civilization, sex life is allowed only in a restricted way. It is for the married couple and only for begetting children. But when sex life is indulged in for sense gratification, illegally and illicitly, both the man and the woman await severe punishment in this world or after death. In this world also, they are punished by virulent diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea, and in the next life, as we see in the passage of Srimad Bhagavatam, they are put into different kinds of hellish conditions to suffer. In Bhagavad Gita, first chapter, illicit sex life is also very much condemned, and it is said that one who produces children by illicit sex life is sent to hell. It is confirmed here in Bhagavatam that such offenders are put into hellish conditions of life in Tamisra, Anta Tamisra, and Rorava. Text 29. Atriva narakasvarga iti mata prachakshate yayatana vainarakyas taihapyupalakshita. Lord Kapila continued, My dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. Purport. Sometimes unbelievers do not accept these statements of scripture regarding hell. They disregard such authorized descriptions. Lord Kapila therefore confirms them by saying that these hellish conditions are also visible on this planet. It is not that they are only on the planet where Yamaraj lives. On the planet of Yamaraj, the sinful man is given the chance to practice living in the hellish conditions which he will have to endure in the next life, and then he is given a chance to take birth on another planet to continue his hellish life. For example, if a man is to be punished to remain in hell and to eat stool and urine, then first of all he practices such habits on the planet of Yamaraj, and then he is given a particular type of body, that of a hog, so that he can eat stool and think that he is enjoying life. It is stated previously that in any hellish condition, the conditioned soul thinks he is happy. Otherwise, it would not be possible for him to suffer hellish life. Text 30. Evam kutumbam bibrana udaram bara evava vishreja ho bayam pretya bunte tat phalam idrisham. After leaving this body, the man who maintained himself and his family members by sinful activities suffers a hellish life, and his relatives suffer also. Purport. The mistake of modern civilization is that man does not believe in the next life. But whether he believes or not, the next life is there, and one has to suffer if one does not lead a responsible life in terms of the injunctions of authoritative scriptures like the Vedas and Puranas. Species lower than human beings are not responsible for their actions because they are made to act in a certain way. But the developed life of human consciousness, if one is not responsible for his activities, then he is sure to get a hellish life, as described herein. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 31 on Wednesday. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees Ki Jai. Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Nishangapali Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai, Sham Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi, Bhakti Devi, Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari 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 Bol, Jai Srimati Uma Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Jai Gurudev. Sripad Krishna ke Keshav Prabhu ji ki jai. Namaste.